Hi, smart people. Why you should read classic literature? Well, one reason is it'll make you sound smart, but there are a lot of other reasons why it can be a positive thing too. Now, I suppose there are different definitions of classic literature, and by some definitions, I maybe haven't read or listened to that much, but by some definitions I have. I haven't tackled like some really many of the really like dense whatever sort of books, but still I've definitely had exposure to it throughout my life. I think the biggest reason to read classic literature, and classic generally means somewhat old for it to reach that status, and I know what should and shouldn't count as classic literature, that's a whole nother thing, but I think a reason is it's something that has stood the test of time, that a lot of people have found meaningful and profound. So it's like if you're reading a book that for decades or even centuries people have found meaningful, it can be a special thing. So that's one reason, is you can get yourself in someone else's thoughts. But I think another reason is you learn to appreciate prose. Like oftentimes more complicated words are used. Like sometimes you might have to look up in a dictionary what it means. Or sometimes maybe you like know the root of a word so you can like kind of guess what it means. Like, oh, that Latin root word, like, oh, that must mean something related to that. So that's something that can be nice. And also sometimes you can pick up on slang, like slang from a certain time period for books that are written like that. It kind of like expands, I feel like, your brain to try to like figure out or like what exactly is meant by it, or they tell you, you're like, oh, that's interesting. And it also can be nice to feel like you're part of like some sort of like cultural conversation. Like if it's a book a lot of people have read, you can be like, oh, I've read that, and if someone else has read it, you can like share opinions. Like sometimes you might even find a book that's considered like a classic you find kind of overrated or not that good, so you can at least like form your own opinion. I will say, especially with like longer classics or more dense, it might be good to like listen to them in audiobook format rather than read again. It depends on the book and your reading level and all that sort of stuff, but it might be like long to get through, especially if there's like a lot of like words that are either slang that you from a previous time period or very like smart words, you know, that are like, I guess then you could say, well, you're not quite appreciating it if you're not like tripping over it. But if you kind of want to get the general story, and then I guess if you really want, you can go back and actually read it if you like the audiobook. So yeah, those are kind of some thoughts of mine as to why like classic novels can be so great and why they can be positive to read. And you can also, when you're reading something from another time and or place, it gives you a whole different perspective than you might have otherwise, and you kind of can see things through someone else's eyes. I suppose that's how all books or literature is, but it can be kind of a unique, sometimes jarring example of it. Whether you agree or disagree, it can still be something to experience, like what it's like to read something from someone who lived however many years ago. So yeah, so that's why I think it can be good to read classic literature if that's something you want to do. So that's why I think reading classic literature can be a really positive thing. Again, it might take you longer to get through some of the books, but it might be like a good challenge. Now, if you're maybe just getting into reading, you might want to stick to relatively easy stuff, but especially if you're more of an advanced reader, adding in a classic book or two, a classic novel or two, might be a really good thing. So, yeah, I guess that's it for now.